On the horizon, twilight crept slowly over the hills of the Alb, and the first tentative streaks of pale brightness revealed the dark outline of a wooden stable. The snorting of nostrils could be heard softly as the footsteps of 6 feet moved cautiously through the now soon to end night toward the stable, careful with each step not to make a sound, like an animal trying to escape its hunter. Their wearers had wide cloaks draped around them with large hoods pulled over their heads so that their bright faces would not shine through the night. "Up ahead," whispered the ranger, now very still, lest we frighten the horses. Behind him followed a delicate body with dark freshly cut short hair, and behind them a priest. With his outstretched hand the ranger gives the two to wait here, while he carefully opens the wooden door and slips in through the narrow gap. In the dark silence of the forest, only a few hundred meters from the city walls, it is now so quiet that they can hear their own heartbeat, racing along despite the night hour, as they listened intently to the city walls, when suddenly an owl let its typical call ring out. Startled, the petite figure flinched. "They say that," she began to explain her fright. "No," the priest interrupted her, "that's just superstition. But there's usually a grain of truth in it," she countered in a whisper. "Where's the ranger?" "He's been in the stable for a very long time. Shall we go and see?" At last, the priest whispers as the ranger led the first horse out. "I had to saddle it first, and it should all be done quietly," was his excuse. By now, the twilight not only allowed the outlines to be seen, but also the details became visible in a light gray. "Here, take the reins," he said to her. "It's getting light. We have to get out of here before they can see us from the city walls, or notice where we are." And immediately he turns to disappear again behind the wooden door. In the distance, soft barking of dogs can be heard. Fearfully she looks at the priest. "Have faith," he tries to comfort her. "In a short while you will be on your way to the Danube." What else should happen now? At the same time, back in the city in an old hostel at the Central Place. It was dark in the sleeping room, but very comfortable for the age, if only because there was only one bed in the room, just as it should be for an officer. The smoke of an extinguished candle drifted through the darkness. The smoke! It ran through his head, and suddenly and jerkily he sat up as the thought jolted him from the middle of his sleep. It smelled like candles. He yells out loud, and in his mind to himself, "Why didn't I think of that in the first place?" Still in his nightgown, he runs out into the hallway so as not to waste valuable time changing clothes. "Get the dogs. Now. They're in the basement," he loudly ordered the night guards. And whispering almost desperately to himself, he added, "Or at least they were." When the officer arrived at the house of the suspects shortly after the guards, it was already brightly lit by portable lanterns, and from all the surrounding houses you could literally feel the pairs of eyes secretly watching the unusual scene that was going on here at the end of the night, but at the same time careful not to attract the attention of the council's henchmen. It is well known here that once even a hint of suspicion has fallen on one, there is no escape even for the innocent. "Well?" he asked the sergeant, while down in the cellar the dogs were already barking loudly. "Did you find them?" The sergeant shakes his head briefly. "No, the dogs just barked at an empty closet." "Show me the closet, you fool," is the gruff reply in a volume that made his counterpart back away. And he didn't wait for that, but almost flew down the ladder at breakneck speed, shooing the dogs aside with a short and curt "Away with you." Hectically, he scans the closet to find an opening mechanism possibly hidden there. Then he knocks on the back. "Hollow!" he exclaims, "It's hollow." And turning to his henchman, "Smash it. Get something heavy and smash it." When the soldier next to him, who could be seen all too clearly that he wanted nothing more than to sleep at last and who thought all this was just a bad dream, did not react quickly enough. It bursts out of him cholerically. "Break it down," I said, "or I'll have the dogs set on you." Now, at last, long halberds are handed down from above, and after a few violent blows the back wall shatters and hundreds of splinters of wood whiz through the small cellar room, and the whole reveals a dark long underground passage. In you go. What are you waiting for? Send out the dogs. I want them. Do I have to tell you everything? Tense, he sits down at the table where just a few hours ago 3 persecuted souls were planning their escape. He plays with the candle. Why didn't I notice this before? He mumbles to himself, rubbing the wax between his fingers. It's like jinxed. He has to laugh at himself then. What else could it be with a witch? Then loudly, "Bring me this red witch. To the stake. I want to see her hair burn in flames." The barking of the dogs has stopped by now. They seem to have already left the corridor at the other end, when a soldier comes crawling through the hole in the closet, squeezing through the broken boards. In his hands he has something soft, in a metallic red, which almost glows by itself, bathing the small room in a menacing red glow. The officer backs away, startled at first, then snatches the red mop from the soldier's hand. "Give it to me." Muttering more to himself than to the soldier, and when he recognizes what it is, "This will make it harder to find her." And again loudly in a frustrated tone and flailing back and forth in front of himself, "Leave me alone, away with you. And bring me the witch." Quickly the remaining guards retreat. They all know that it is not good to be near him. If the officer is in a bad mood, it can hit anyone. When he is just sitting alone at the creaking wooden table, he holds the red hair in front of his face and smells it intensely. What is that smell, he thinks to himself, and pulls in the air intensely. "She must have bewitched me," were his last thoughts before he fell off the chair and pulled the lantern off the table with him. The last thing he saw was the red hair scorching in the flames, its smoke clouding the rest of his senses before the numbing fumes made him lose consciousness. But his wish had come true. He had seen her hair burst into flames. Back in the woods. "You can be in Donauworth in 4 hours, the priest continued to encourage her. "The roads are dry at the moment. And when it's light, you can make good speed." Worried and almost tears in her eyes, she looked up at him. "And what about you?" With a smile on his lips, he answers her, "I'm going in the other direction. To Fichtenau. To the magic forest, to the petrified witch. None of the henchmen dare go into the mushroom circle." "But what if they catch you first? What are they going to do?" He replies to her with a dismissive wave of his hand. "They have no proof that I helped you. And I am a priest, after all. I'm under the protection of the church. But only as long as they don't know you've broken their rules." Now the ranger comes out of the stable with the second horse. A noble black horse, tall, and the muscles under his skin gave a hint of his strength and the speed they can unleash. "Here, this one is for you. With him you should be able to escape all hunters." She takes the reins in her hand and strokes his tail lovingly. "My good one." And then saddles up with a flourish. After both had mounted, the priest still speaks admonishing words to them. "If you run into any trouble, you can ask for Emil the Fat in the Harburg. Tell him I sent you. He can get you supplies and give you shelter until a new boat is organized. He is a loyal friend. And he knows the secret of the book. And remember, whatever happens, you must take the book to the Moldavian Druid. Only then can it fulfill its destiny. And now get on your way, I hear voices of many men and the barking of dogs is coming closer. May the blessing of God be with you. He strikes the black horse with the flat of his hand on the back. They didn't let themselves be told a second time, and with a hearty giddy up and a light heel strike they gave the order to the horses, and as if shot out of a cannon the black horse shot off over the high grasses, along the warnets and between small lakes and ponds towards the southeast. The priest sat down on the ground and turned his head towards the east, where the rising sun was sending its first tentative rays of sunlight in soft pink over the horizon, covered by a light mist that was quickly clearing. No sooner had the sound of hooves died away and the shadows of the horses disappeared behind the trees and bushes than there was a crash in the undergrowth behind him, and dogs and soldiers surrounded him. The dogs barked loudly and could hardly be held back from mauling him by the soldiers, who had picked up his scent and now had their target right in front of their noses. Be welcome to me, my brothers. What brings you to God's nature at such an early hour? We can ask you the same. What are you doing here, Padre? I pray to God to spare us from the plague and to give the farmers a rich harvest. There is no better time for this than when God's day awakens and He sends us the sun, my brothers. Is there anyone else here with you? You are here and your dogs. Answer, or shall I let the dogs ask you? As you see, I am here alone with God our Lord. Did you see anyone else? There were horsemen coming along the way, my Lord. How many were there and where did they ride to? Come on, tell me, or shall I loosen your tongue with a few strokes of the cane? If the Lord wills it, so be it, the priest replies in a humble tone without looking up. But how shall I answer you if you strike me? And what will the bishop say when he hears about this? There will soon be no one to tell him about it if you don't tell us soon what you saw. How many and where did they ride? I prayed to God. I didn't see anyone, only heard them. They came from the same direction as those horses. And indeed, the clatter of many horses now sounded, approaching from the direction of the city wall on the path. The soldiers looked in the direction of the arriving horsemen. Soldiers like them. But one of the riders could barely hold on to his horse. When the arriving riders stopped in front of the other soldiers, the dogs and the priest, one rider slipped powerlessly from the saddle and the soldiers rushed to help, catching and supporting him. Enraged, he looked to the priest. You, what have you done? You're in cahoots with her. Eyes red under his eyes, inflamed by the smoke, and coughing heavily with each sentence, he grabs the priest by the collar. You poisoned me. You wanted to kill me, but I will not be disposed of so easily. My lord, what are you talking about? I am a man of the church. While the priest was facing the rage of the officer and trying to calm him down, the two horses had been racing further south. Shortly before the mouth of the Hallbach they turned south between Hallweier and Eschelbeihe, now following the course of the Hasselbach. Shortly before its source it went uphill, between two over 500-meter high mountains through a narrow gorge. From now on it was almost all downhill towards the Danube, but they had only completed a third of the way and more than 40 kilometers still lay ahead of them. Somehow a sentence from the book came into her mind. It was cold and night, and there was frost and darkness, and she was wondering what happened to the priest, while she was listening to the rhythmic trampling of the hooves.